Lovely. Okay. Hello, everyone, and others will filter in. I think we have various people who need to attend to various events today. But welcome to our February and final monthly cohort meeting before we have the in-person celebration, which is really wild that we're actually here right now. Uh, I wanted to do an opening circle question, and since we're a smallish group right now, might be nice. One of the questions we've been pondering on our end are what are the ways that we make it the unseen seen? I actually think we did this, Josephine, in our little working group meeting. So you're gonna hear me repeat my answer. But what are the ways we make the unseen seen, especially as we think about like reporting and celebrating, and all of that, and seeing all of our work. But it can be like personal in your work life, whatever it is. So for me, I actually have a daily journaling practice. I do it in the morning. And it's just kind of a way for me to like observe like what are the things I'm feeling, what are the things that are coming up, and it just kind of suddenly becomes like real and manageable. But without that little practice, those little like unseen bubblings in my mind don't get acknowledged and taken care of. So that's a personal approach that I have for making the unseen seen. Um, Anyone want to share? No pressure to share about your personal spiritual practices. It could be just about a work thing. Grace, you look quizzical.
Trying to come up with something about making the unseen seen, but I think it's a very broad question.
Yeah.
I can try my hand at it.
Sounds good. Yeah, Helen.
It's been cool, like so we had our first climate action dinner and movie last week, and then this is the second week. And I don't know if it's really like seen and unseen, but it kind of is like we watched, a life on our planet by David Attenborough documentary from Netflix together and ate dinner, and it was like a really inspiring conversation. And I think like just the diversity of people that came, it was about like 9 people. It was really making the unseen seen. Like it was, we sometimes we just think about these things about climate action in our heads, or we'll read an article, but it's not like being spoke about really socially, at least like in our organization really yet. Like, and even like the fact that only 9 people came to like a free dinner and a movie, it was like, but everybody who talked after, like there were some really passionate, and I was surprised, like older people, like an octogenarian, like went out of his way. He literally gave like $100 tzedakah for this project, and then said like, why are not poor people not here? He doesn't even use the internet, but he's like, I'm making phone calls this week, and literally there's 20 people coming. It's over doubled. 20 people coming tonight because of this man who like doesn't drive a car, and because of the planet and fossil fuels, and like rides his electric bike everywhere. He's like 80 something years old. And I think the seen and the unseen coming seen is like people who are maybe emerging as leaders in our community and are coming out of the woodwork, and seeing the strengths of people through community involvement, and people coming together to like be seen in community, when with the pandemic, like we didn't really have that. People were like very hidden. So I don't know if it's exactly as you were intending with the question, but I've been seeing a lot of revealing of the unseen coming out with this project. So I'm really grateful for Chazon and for this cohort, and just everything that whole journey has brought. It's been really cool.
What a great, fun answer. I'm glad to have heard that story. That was so awesome, Helen. Thank you. Thank you. Was my share that spurred any inspiration?
I think it's really cool to hear that story, Helen. And I think that, even outside of the conversation of Hazan, the work that you've been doing in White Rock over the last year, we've seen so many people come out of the woodwork, and that's really a way to see the unseen members of our community being seen. And that's a really exciting movement, and really exciting to see that community come alive, especially after COVID.
Thanks. Yeah, it's fun to people actually eager to do that. I think sometimes you just need an invitation, you know.
I know we have like Josephine Shearer's kind of like that. I know you're both running. I'm also aware that a few people have to get off early. So there's actually a few things that I just want to make sure we create space for before people have to drop off. And I think the bigger question is like, are there questions about how to receive, like how to finalize certification? I want to make sure that anyone that can't stay the whole time at least has opportunities to ask questions about that. Just like the final parts of the process. I was going to walk through it more in depth, but maybe we should do like a condensed part now.
Hi, Bruce.
Yeah.
Oh.
Why don't you go ahead, Shira, and hi, Shelly.
Sorry, I sent you an email earlier because I was actually running into a few issues before, and it could be that I just wasn't doing it properly, and I don't want to make this meeting about me, so we can always talk about this one-on-one. But I found that when I think I did an update for one of them, it wasn't completed, and then when I went to my other project, all of the information auto-populated, and when I deleted one, it deleted it from the other. So I don't know if I'm doing something.
Okay, that I'll actually address that as like a broader thing. If you have challenges with the form and anything happens, I'll do a few things with the form. If you have any challenges with the form, you can always email me just like the things you were going to enter, and I'll make sure it gets entered in the back end. Because sometimes playing with drafts, that's where things get funny. So I did get one submission from you, Shira, but it sounds like there was more you wanted to submit, and I got lost in the ether. So just make sure you send that. You can send it over to me via email. And then Grace also mentioned earlier, related to this, it's been a while since she, and I imagine many people logged into the portal. And I can help just shoot me an email and I can send a password reset link. So that's an easy way.
Thank you.
Yes. So just shoot me an email so I know to send it, and that can happen there. Helen, you had a question. It looked like you had a question.
I was just asking you for a general, like I'm kind of familiar with the portal because I've uploaded some projects on it, but is there like some kind of finalizing procedure that has to be done with that? Maybe you can just go over that generally. Okay.
Yeah. I'll make sure we do that before you hop off. So I'll do it now. So the rest of this year looks like submitting your project information to the portal. Hello, Dahlia. To the portal, and then we'll review it to make sure it meets the requirements. And for the most part, I've been in conversation with many people, so like you should be aware, like you're on, like if you're on track or if you're having challenges, there shouldn't be any surprises, right? Like no one should be surprised about kind of the outcomes, because we've been in pretty close conversation for the most part. So we'll review it, and then I believe you're sending out like a survey to get some feedback. So Shelly, so keep an eye out for that. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Shelly, or just that a survey is coming out. Great, and then that'll be happening between the forms, and then we have the in-person celebration, and that's when the actual certificates, like physical certificates, will be awarded. And that's pretty much the arc of like the rest of this particular cycle. Yeah. And Dahlia, you just want to just hop off and say hi? We have you here now.
Yeah, sorry I'm late. Great to see you all.
Great to see you. Some people have to hop off early, so we were just taking any questions about completing certification, but there's also more space built in later. Any other questions just about the nitty-gritty of finishing things up? And I will say office hours will still be ongoing until really the Wednesday before our celebration, because I will be taking a vacation day to go to Squamish before I see you all. that weekend. So I will be out of the office that day. And if you can get your reports in by March 1st, that would help me, mostly because I have to like go create certificates. And if like that's not like if there's any challenges, things are flexible, just let me know and we can talk about it. I'm very much want to make myself available to anyone.
Bruce, I apologize if you've done this. Have you talked about the plans for the 26th? Or?
No, I just bumped up the certification stuff because Helen and Shira need to drop off early. So we kind of went outside the agenda, but I was going to come back to that. But maybe we'll pivot to that briefly again, just before you all drop off. So we have the celebration coming up. An email invite went out to the specific leader of each site because we're requesting RSVP. There are limited spaces. Just in terms of venue size and who could be accommodated. So if you can RSVP on behalf of people on your green team, we could accommodate like 2 or 3 people from each green team, probably around 3. So just kind of checking your email. If you haven't heard, just check in with the person who is your leader or shoot me an email about that. It's going to be hosted by Hillel at UBC. The hours are going to be between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. for the formal schedule. Shelly, are we going to be able to get in like 15, 30 minutes early just to kind of have people? Yeah, so doors will open at 9:30. The program will formally start at 10. Kind of very similar structure to the launch day last year. Yeah, and then for the agenda, I actually had this on slides, but I'll say it off the cuff now. So we have a few speakers, which I'm really excited about. One is from the Dave Suzuki Foundation. That's going to be sharing about the lessons from their summer camp program. That I believe is specifically working with, facilitated by Indigenous peoples in the area. Okay, yeah, Shelly's nodding, so I did get that correct. We also have Michaela Frame, who's an environmental climate researcher who spoke at the recent event at Shaare Zedek. A member of Shaare Zedek is also doing a great program. We were talking about it last week. I'm super excited about it. There's a possibility there'll be worms. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we'll be talking about kind of how that waste connects to it. So that'll be great. But really, the most important guests are all of you. Really, like that's the real stars of the show is everyone from this cohort, and we'll be celebrating the various projects and kind of uplifting what's happened and sharing stories and kind of swapping out there. There'll be a fine, lovely vegan meal catered by Hillel. Did I miss anything, Shelley?
No, I think that's it. And it's okay to bring the worm bins.
Oh yes, that's so exciting. So now we have to secure the worm bins. I think we were working actually with JCC. One of their projects this year was to start bringing worm bin education to their early childhood education. So we might be able to like double down and like make that a part of it. So that's extremely exciting. Anything about the celebration while we're on the topic? Cool, and I think most of the people here have responded. But if you haven't, just ping me and we'll figure that out. We have some time, but I'll progressively start annoying you more and more if I haven't heard back as the day comes closer. So that's like the logistical things that hopefully everyone heard. I want to step back and do 2 updates. One is there were just a ton of Tu B'Shvat or just general events that were happening between the last meeting and this meeting. And I'd love to hear how they went. I know, Grace, you had one. Helen, you got to share about it already. Shelly, I haven't had a chance to hear about how the event at Shaare Zedek went. I'd love to hear about it because there's so many programs that happened just in the last 4 or 5 weeks.
I think Grace probably can report on that. I wasn't able to attend. So Grace, you were there, right?
Yeah, I was there. The Shaare Zedek event was really great. We had a nice vegan food. Shaare Zedek makes some really, really great vegan meatballs, which was awesome. And the panel was very, very engaging, very interesting. Michaela speaks incredibly well. And it was a well-moderated panel, and it was nice to see representation from Michaela and my generation through the synagogue speaking about environmentalism, which was really cool.
Do you also want to share about the Federation event?
Sure. So we had our Swap for Sustainability, which we partnered with a local organization called Dress for Success, which was really cool. And we had another organization called Threading Change. Their executive director, Sophia Yang, came to that. We did the event in one of the most environmentally friendly locations in Vancouver. So we did it in Van Dusen. Everything that we had was like the whole event was sort of brought with sustainability in mind. So instead of sort of having disposables, we rented everything. We had vegan food that we worked with our caterer Nava to sort of make sure that that was all like locally sourced food as well, which was great. So the food was really positive, and we were able to, through our clothing swap, actually donate. They're still in my car, but there's about 9 or 10 bags of clothing that different women and men brought to this event. And we sort of had a swap system going. So folks will now have 9 or 10 bags of clothing to donate to Dress for Success, which is an organization that works with women here in Vancouver to help them get back on their feet, and equips them with the right stuff to be able to re-enter the job market. I apologize, I couldn't think of the word, but it was really great. We probably had about 40 young adults present at that event, and it was really nice to see who came out, and the feedback that we got for that was incredibly positive, and asks for more clothing swaps and more educational opportunities like that, like learning from Sophia.
Very cool. Yeah. Very cool. Are there any events that I missed that people want to share back about? There was another cool update, which I'm going to share out to the whole cohort. I don't know if you all saw that the cohort was spotlighted in Canadian Jewish News. I think it was about a week ago, which was really, really fabulous. Kind of like all 14 sites were shouted out. It was a really beautiful piece. I just put it in the chat. So I just want to make sure everyone had a chance to see that, just to see just kind of the love that Vancouver got, and just in the acknowledgement of all your work. So that was really fun. There was also a supplementary podcast that went out with it. So another fun thing to lift up.
I just wanted to add that can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, that I was also at the Sharet Tzedek event, and it really was a wonderful, wonderful evening. And I was especially excited about it because I remember at the beginning of last year, it was, the Sharet Tzedek rabbi who was sort of a little bit unsure of how his congregation would react to this whole process and project. And as it turned out, they just did an absolute bang-up affair. It was lovely. The speakers were incredibly interesting. Michaela was, I think, the star of the evening. But, they had someone who works at YVR, and he's working on sustainability in the airport. They had another person who, just does kind of charitable work that's all focused on sustainability and the environment. It was just really very, very impressive effort.
Very cool. Thank you, Dahlia. Danielle and Josephine, I don't know if you want to take a minute now to share about the fundraiser movie night again, while we're standing in update mode, and then we'll pivot to a little bit of a content portion.
Okay, I don't mind sharing. We were thinking about having screening a movie at the JCC for open to the community, and have the money allocated either to the new garden, the community garden that is coming up in VTT, or and my conclusion from being dealing with that kind of stuff is that food sustainability is one of the most important things and one of the things that we can really make a change as individuals. My war on plastic is a bit a lost cause, even though I eliminate plastic as much as I can. But if you go to a hospital for a day and you see how much plastic waste it's just so. Yeah, my aim is to work more on food sustainability, and that can make a big change. The amount of food that are thrown out every day is crazy. It's just, we can feed the world, and yeah, so having people more aware of what's going on. So yeah, so the idea is, yeah, to have this as a fundraiser and do something with the money, but we need people to step in, because it's like 380 seats at JCC. So if nobody's going on with us, we still have to pay the rent and everything.
So I guess in terms of partnership, what would you need from other sites to make this event
It's
happen?
all in the letter. We need partners organizing, selling tickets, volunteering the day of the screening. Yeah.
Okay.
So if anybody's in and willing to pull this thing together, we'll be happy to have partners.
To begin with, we also need like a committee where we're able to make collective decisions, because this is all this GFS organizing, but it's a community event, because we are not just also trying to just have it with the cohort group, we're also going to be inviting clients, staff members. So it's like something really central, not very particular to GFS. So in essence, what we're pretty much asking for is like people to get on board a committee where we're able to make collective decisions on sort of collaboration. Although we did speak to JCC, and some did say, I think the person in charge did mention that at this time they can't give the hall for free, but it can be given at a discounted rate. So stuff like that is what we need to generally discuss, and yeah, that's sort of the plan.
Okay. So we're a smallish group tonight, but maybe if people see the recording, now so just reach out to Danielle and Josephine if you want to be part of an organizing committee for this event. And maybe you want to also resend the email out to the group, the original email you sent to the Google group.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a funny time of year because we're kind of like in between now, like wrapping up our projects and the actual awarding of certification. So one of the things I was hoping to chat about is like what now? Like, what do we do with all this work, these beautiful framed pieces of paper, and anything that we've done over the last year? I'll give you like the answer. It's like, well, we're gonna like tell everyone we know about it, and that I want to spend some time just talk about like why is promotion important? How can we use it? How does it actually advance our goals? Me personally, it's like something this kind of conversation is a conversation I've had to learn how to become comfortable with in my professional life, because I'm not much of like a kind of a self-promotional type. So I wanted to just have a conversation what we've seen work and maybe brainstorm some ways. How can it actually not just do it to toot our own horns, but to actually set us up to get more buy-in, more conversation for next year, right? Like how can actually talking about what we've done or what others have done in the cohort can help set us up where build on successes, or maybe even help shore up support where we were challenged this past year. Dolly, were you about to say something? I saw you just came off mute.
Me?
No.
Oh, Dahlia, but you could also say something, Shelley. Okay, great. So I have a few like questions. So my first one is, this was the opening question, but now I'm wondering, like, where have you done this in your like organization, right? It's like, where's something that wasn't seen, right? Like where things were happening and no one knew about it, and all of a sudden you were able to actually make it be known. And what was the impact about that?
I think for us, one of the things that, and Shelley, please feel free to jump in, but I think for us, one of the things that we've really noticed is the amount of paper that we use when we go through campaign. And it's not that it wasn't unseen, but we'd never looked at that tangibly before and how we could potentially change it. And I believe that the campaign team this year has sort of made a decision, and in their canvasser surveys, they're asking folks if they would be okay with receiving digital copies of pledge cards rather than having thousands of pledge cards printed and sent through the mail. So I think that for us, while it wasn't something that was unseen, it was something that we've never really thought about changing. And that's really exciting to potentially be walking into a new campaign where that, even if we could cut back by a tiny bit, that would be a really big improvement.
Yeah, I guess another way of saying it is also just like shining a light on it, right? Like suddenly we shine a light on it. Yeah. Anyone else? Because the follow-up question is going to be, is like, as a result of kind of like making that scene, is like, what opportunities suddenly were created, right? Like, who did you reach anew? So it sounds like, right, Grace, when you just mentioned that there was this opportunity to actually change the impact of the organization. And like now that we talked about it, now that someone that may have not been thinking about it saw it, it changed things. Thanks, Josephine. So a lot of the times, even just creating a green team, right? Like just that act in itself, all of a sudden makes people think like, oh my God, we have a huge kiddish and all this food's going to waste. Just because people are talking about it. Nothing's changed, but all of a sudden these new opportunities are created. Yeah, so, and one of the reasons why I want to bring it up, because a lot of times this time of year, I find sites tend to be their own worst critic, like where we're like, we didn't do enough. Like no matter how much we did, we didn't do enough, and it never feels good. And that's also just the problem with just kind of the environmental experience and being an environmentalist. It's like we're never doing enough, but just that shine the light and telling others creates new opportunities. So I really want to, like, if that's one thing that we take away from that, no matter what kind of happened, that we can create new opportunities just by telling people. So I'm wondering, what are some things that people would want to think about promoting either in your organization, right? So like a question would be like, internally, do people know you exist, right? Like on a range of everyone knows us, you can't not know the XYZ green team, or like we kind of operate in the shadows. I'd love to hear like within like Or Shalom and the Federation and JFS, like, do people know about your team? I'm getting a nod from Grace. Yeah. Dahlia.
Well, I mean, we've had an active, we call it the Tikkun Olam committee, a Tikkun Olam coordinating committee. And one of the items on their agenda this year has definitely been climate change and the environment. And they send out a weekly or at least monthly update on all the activities that they're involved in. There's a lot of last Friday, there was a big protest outside the Vancouver Art Gallery about, or no, it was outside City Hall, about the provincial government really taking, the municipal government really taking a strong stand. It was called for the, for the children. And so those activities are sort of publicized through our weekly newsletter. So definitely the Tikkun Olam committee in our synagogue is a very, very strong and active group. And the environment is one of their mandates, climate change. So, we do a lot of protesting. We report back on whatever activities we are involved in. So they definitely know we exist. I don't know if they know we exist as part of this whole Chazon partnership and program over the last year, but they, we haven't done anything that's highlighted the partnership, but we have been busy doing our usual, very environmentally friendly kiddush, and we compost, and everyone's very aware of what to do with food that's left over after kiddush and things like that. So, although we haven't had much energy to put towards a specific project as part of the Chazon seal of sustainability, we are still continuing very much to be a loud presence in the synagogue itself.
I'm wondering, that's actually, you're like a few steps ahead, right? This, like the fact that you're so active in a newsletter that people know what's going on. I'm wondering, how does that fed back and supported the community's development over time? Like, do you find that when you bring new ideas, there's just like more support because people know what you're up to?
Well, yeah, I mean, for example, around, I think it was around Pesach last year, we sent out a whole newsletter was about how you can, what can you do differently this Pesach than you've done before. And everybody and people embrace it. There's like a competition afterwards. Okay, how many, what did you do at your Seder to make it more environmentally friendly? And, people responded. And so, I think our community is very much on board and very spread the word and respond well. And I think it's.
Yeah. I'm wondering, for others, do you get the sense that like the organization, at least like internally, people know that you exist and what you're up to? Grace, yeah.
Yeah, I think internally as an organization, people know that we exist. They know what we're up to. We are lucky that we've gotten representation from a majority of our departments, which is great. I don't know if externally our lay leaders are quite as aware, or specifically the ones who haven't been involved in sort of planning the swap for sustainability and pieces like that. I don't know if they're necessarily as aware about our green team, but I'm hoping that over time they will become aware.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that was like part two of the question of like externally, who is aware, and either would it benefit just whether would telling more people internally help us get more internal support, or are there people outside that do need to know what we're up to, so it supports either a larger event next year, or a lot of times we have to get boards on board or other people in our community. And what are some of like pathways that we could start talking about that? And I do have there are a bunch of slides, and we actually have a resource on the portal that I wanted to share about. But Danielle, before we move to that, Danielle, I'm wondering, how well known is the work of the Green Team within JFS? I almost feel like the question kind of like answers itself, but how aware is everyone?
Well, I think they're quite aware. It's a very small organization, so
yeah,
the people in the offices are aware. The kitchen staff is very aware. we have quite a few vegans there, so everybody's pushing
Yeah.
nicely, but there is awareness. With our clients, we had such a variety of people, all ages, and not everybody, it's a more a one-on-one. So, but I think in general, there's more awareness. If you listen to the news, it's always there, sustainability and climate warming. And so it it's getting there slowly, but I think that the awareness creates the change. So
Yeah. Amazing. One question I'd love to drop in the back of people's minds to think about, and then I'm going to share some strategies that we have. And I'll also share out a link to the toolkit on how to publicize some of our work. If you could ever wish that any one group that you work with just knew more about either the sustainability work you've done or maybe a success you've observed in another group here, like who would that be? Like, would it be a board, a funder, the congregation, my executive director, like whatever? Like, is there just, if you have one wish, who would that be? And then as you're thinking about that, right, there might be a strategy that we could adopt out of the list that I'm about to share. And if there's anything that pops up now, please feel free to share. Otherwise, I'll jump into this other list. Cool. When I do have the screen share up, it's pretty hard for me to see, so feel free just to interrupt me if you want to jump in. Oh, there we go. So some of the things that we find works, right? So having an organizational leader talk about it. So in a synagogue setting, it's often like the rabbi giving a davar, or if you have the culture of lay leaders giving sermons either on Friday night or Saturday morning, but having them just talk about it. Usually Tu B'Shvat is like the big time of year, but even around Passover time, right? There's so many like last year in Chazon, we used a lot of conversation about covenant and, you know, like making an agreement to kind of take care of the earth in the long term. But having that organizational leader just foreground whatever's happening in that appropriate setting, right? So if you want to make sure that the congregation is on board, that's the place. But let's say if it's you just want to garner more institutional capacity, you need the board to start thinking more creatively about it, maybe to consider creating a sustainability committee, right? Then maybe it's having the president, the ED have a conversation there or invite you in to talk about it there. But just the right messenger at the right place is often really, really helpful. Another one, which actually came up pretty recently, using your website to publicize what you've done. And this actually came up in a conversation with Ariel at Sharet Tzedek. One of the things we were discussing was, you know, they had this goal of doing an energy audit. In the process of doing the energy audit, they just realized, like, oh my God, we've done so much on sustainability and we didn't even have it recorded. It just wasn't organized anywhere. We didn't realize how far ahead of the game we were. So actually, like a really important project is just to actually have a sustainability report, statement, whatever's on the website, because then all of a sudden it actually shows to the world and to the congregation, like, these are things that we're not only working on, but that we're putting our values into action. So right, it seemed like in the case of Sharet Tzedek that such a big outcome was uncovering all of this really amazing sustainability work. It seemed like the next logical step was like, well, let's publish it. Let's let everyone know that it's there. Another one, which Dolly, I think you did a really good job of kind of plugging the power of, is just sharing things out in whatever the regular medium communication is internally. And you know, I've been in organizations where there is a regular newsletter. I've sometimes been the author of the regular newsletter that no one really reads, right? Like, it's okay to be honest that, like, there are certain outlets that are not as successful, and we might feel compelled, like, oh my God, we should put something in there, but if it's not as effective, we could do that. Dolly, you just shared like an example where like it sounds like it's a very effective medium. So like if there's a regular thing that people read, absolutely do it, right? So a nice popular one is many synagogues. I guess I have like synagogues on my mind right now. On like Thursday or Friday afternoon, there might be like a Shabbat bulletin that goes out. Usually those are actually very well read. So you might actually find that's a good place to plug something. Similarly, this next one, there's this idea that like all things can be solved by social media. So I want to say like, social media is super effective. Again, if it's the way that your organization communicates. So like this has actually been a conversation at Chazon. Like how do we use social media and who's actually reading things? And there's certain things that work really well in there and other things that don't. So I wouldn't encourage anyone to say, oh my God, we have to go open an Instagram account right now, right? Like if you don't have it, chances are it's not an effective way to communicate at the moment. But if you do, right, this might be a way to communicate out to other people. So like my home synagogue, we actually have like a fairly active Facebook group. So that would be a great place that if I want to advocate for things that are going on to go there. I just want to pause because there's another segment, but just if people want to just like share thoughts about if anything's like kind of coming up of creative ways to use any of these outlets that you might have not thought about before or that you're ready and you want to share a success. Great, so I'll hop to the next page. There we go. So I said board meetings already. It bears, it's really worth reinforcing that because so much strategic momentum comes from getting things on the board agenda. Especially after a year of working with, we're 14 organizations, so 13 other organizations, and being able to highlight both what you were able to accomplish, but also case studies what other people were able to accomplish, expands the sense of what's possible in the future. So I really just want to underscore this, not just leveraging what you've done, but also what you hear about at the celebration day or chatting with other people about what they've done and highlighting that. So the next one is signage, which will really come after the celebration day when you do actually have physical certificates. Put it up, let people know what's happening, but also if you're doing a really sustainable kiddush, make sure you have signs to let people know where that's going. Really good sustainability work often just by its nature isn't seen. I still can't get over how like in most of Vancouver, like you don't have to worry about clean electricity because you're on clean hydro. But like a big thing I talk about all the time, it's like my go-to. People don't know when I've switched the source of my electricity. They never see it. They just turn on the light. And if I don't have a sign or if I don't talk about it, they'll never know. So finding those places to strategically place signage is extremely important because it makes that unseen seen. So things like Kiddush is a really great place because it's a high traffic area. But even things like replacing the weather stripping on your windows, right? Like right after it was done, right? So like just to make sure your windows improve their installation. It's on my mind because a seal site elsewhere recently reported on that. No one's gonna know that someone came in and stripped the windows. But if you just post just a little sign somewhere that says, we just installed this and now, we're saving this much in energy, right? And we're actually able to keep it this much warmer and actually putting numbers to it, just makes a huge difference because these are things that people don't see. Local Jewish or community newspaper, you all, that has happened, right? The Canadian Jewish News did cover you. Also, the Federation does some kind of like community newsletter publishing, and something did go into, I think, the Federation newsletter maybe 3 or 4 months ago. I think it was in December, if I recall. But again, keeping these things out there. These are stories that these outlets love to talk about. So really, really use them. When you have new people join, so certainly with synagogues, but I'm wondering, Danielle, when you have new clients join, is there some kind of a packet or some kind of orientation that they receive?
Each department has its own intakes and things like that, but
Yeah.
some of the clients we provide home support to senior people who are very fragile. Don't think we can do any teaching about sustainability depending on the client. So what is your relationship with the client, and what are the boundaries, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh.
It's a bit more problematic.
Yeah, but I guess depending on the department, like you do have the vegan kitchen, right? There might
Yeah,
be small
they
ways
they're
to fund
the
those types of
vegan.
things.
Yeah, most of the meals we send out are vegetarian or vegan. So our kitchen is vegetarian, mostly vegan. Yeah, so the meal program, they are aware of that they are not getting any. It's all plant-based. So yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I'm not really aware of how like the Federation works with new communities or how often new communities come in. But also if there's some kind of like orientation or even new donors, right? Like when you're just something about how we're like living out our values, our Jewish values through sustainability, having that included in documents just allows it to represent like, oh, this is a part of our DNA and this is something for us to think about. And go ahead, Shelley.
I would say we haven't. And I think there's always a little bit of an anxiety about raising some of these issues with donors.
Yeah.
So, we've talked about this initiative. We've talked about some things in general, but we haven't done any education around it.
Yeah. And I would say, like, I don't even think in these moments education is necessary. I think just sharing what we do, especially with just like kind of just like placed there softly, just so it's out in the world, it's probably plenty, right? Because it's certainly not always even appropriate, right? Like that's not the reason why they're coming to us in that moment.
Yeah.
And then the last two, just data collection. And when I say data, I think just demonstrating impact, right? Where were we before? Where were we now? And how can we actually just show tangible change? So if it's in trash bags used per kiddush, that's really that's one way. But finding ways to visualize differences is really, really helpful. In America, we love to talk about things in terms of like lengths of football fields to discuss how like far things are apart. I still don't understand it, so I'm saying it to kind of like poke fun at ourselves. But those kinds of visualizations are extremely, really, really, really helpful. So in terms of like amounts of energy, finding different ways to quantify energy, like kilowatt hours is not a very accessible term to most people outside of the sustainability world. So finding different ways to talk about that is really, really helpful. And then the last bit is celebrating your accomplishments. Like you could do your own horn. So it's hosting an event in a new garden. One of my favorite, I must have shared this at some point, but one of my favorite ways people celebrated something was a synagogue created their like a mobile washing kit. They didn't own their own space, so they had a bunch of dish bins that had sanitizing liquid, and they bring it in and out for Shabbos. And the first Shabbat it came out, they had everyone get around and just like dance a hora around the new wash bins to celebrate that it was now a zero waste kiddush. and it like made such like everyone was so excited about it because people put themselves out there and got a little sticky, and it got really adopted very well by the community because people were just really excited about celebrating because people just put themselves out. So I'm gonna pause there. And I just wonder if there's any lingering thoughts on how people, would want to use the experience of this year to set the stage for next year, right? And like to open up conversations. Are there any conversations that you want to workshop opening, or audiences you want to figure out how to reach and talk to? Now is the space for us to brainstorm and talk through challenges together.
I'm curious, Bruce, if you have any input on how to continue the conversations internally instead of externally, if that makes sense. Like there are certain things that I think that we can do internally as an organization that aren't necessarily to do with events and programmatic pieces, but I also don't want to push too hard. So I was wondering if you had any advice on that.
Yeah. Are there any challenges that you're, and share to whatever degree you feel comfortable, but like, is there anything, I guess being like a little more specific about the challenges that you're anticipating that you're facing would be helpful?
It's a very specific one. Our tax receipting program is currently manual.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be great to be able to digitize it.
Yeah. So there's this phrase which I really love, just in general, like just like taking the long view, right? So like on something thorny like that, I kind of heard the subtext like this is a slow to move thing. It's very operationalized in some ways, and we're not over there. Mm-hmm. Just to take the long view, but finding different ways to keep the conversation alive. And so I'll give two answers. One is applying just constant gentle pressure. One of the metaphors the person that first shared me was like at a restaurant, like when they open up service, they might say the salt shaker needs to be the center of the table every single time. And then every time it's off the center, someone just gently comes by and puts it back in the center. So finding ways to talk about it ongoingly in a gentle way. So it's just kind of in the ether. So that's one. I don't know if it doesn't sound like that would directly address the challenge, which would lead to the second is opening up a conversation with just asking questions without having any agenda with what comes out of it, and really hear like what are the challenges or the concerns. And not even trying to solve it necessarily, but just really hearing those concerns. Mm-hmm. And bringing them to maybe a collaborative community to talk it through. But yeah, okay. I think, yeah, especially with these kind of like entrenched challenges, just open up the conversation where people feel like everyone's welcome to the table is usually a really helpful way to bring it up every so often. Yeah, cool. So we have 4 minutes left. Any last questions or things that people want to chat about? Amazing. Well, then I will see you all in about 5 weeks. I'm super excited to see everyone. This has been really, really lovely, even if it's been, across a continent for me, just to get to know everyone every month. And I've just really enjoyed kind of all of your energy and your commitment and your passion. It's been really, really a blast. So I felt honored to be able to ask to do this work with all of you. So thank you. And we'll close out. And then if people do want to workshop anything specific, I'll hang out a little bit longer. And Dal, if you do have a minute, I'd love to talk about getting what you've been working on into our portal, so we could wrap up or Shalom. But thank you, everyone. I'll stop the recording now.